said on Gandhi and his conception of truth as he brought it into politics. Forget about everything else. What is Gandhi uppermost in our mind? What is Gandhi in history? Gandhi in history is the person who led a civil rights movement in South Africa in a non-violent way successfully. Gandhi is the leader who brought British imperialism to an end through a truth and ahimsa guided philosophy of action. I want to say about Gandhi's conception of truth. Begin with how Gandhi began, not how we begin. People have spoken about inner voice, freedom of conscience. Let us start with the assumption there was a time when freedom of conscience and freedom to own property was not allowed in any country. At a time, these freedoms, freedom of conscience and freedom to own property, got allowed. Freedom of conscience, the Inquisition in Europe, the religious wars, they were against freedom of conscience. They brought it to an end by saying freedom of conscience, yes, in the private sphere, personal sphere. Of course, they said, cuius regio, eius religio. The king will have his religion in his country. That is how the birth of secular state and so on. Forget about that. What I am trying to say is, then freedom to own property, makai, corn. Only about 100 families in UK were allowed to import, to grow corn on their lands, the nobles, the kings. They could not import corn from Europe across. So freedom of owning property was allowed. And I say Mackay because Lord Cornwallis, the Mackay Lord, also came to India. The point I'm trying to say is, Gandhi was in South Africa at a time when civil liberties and political rights were operative for the metropolis of the imperialist country in UK, not in the colony in South Africa, not in the colony in India. Although in 1859, when the East India Company rule was replaced by direct rule from England, the Queen Victoria proclaimed that I grant freedom of equal liberties to the Indians. In South Africa, when these civil liberties were denied by the British colony in South Africa, Gandhi fought for regaining these rights for the Indians, immigrants there. In a meeting, one of the Indians, Gandhi wanted to resist this denial of civil liberties to the Indians in South Africa. Civil liberties which were recognized in UK, but denied by the UK provincial government, colonial government in South Africa. How do you get this? Gandhi only had two options. Civil liberties, Gandhi had a newspaper. Civil liberties campaigns could not regain these denied civil liberties for the Indians. He did not want to resort to the method of violence, which he found when he was in London. Madanlal Dhingra, he had assassinated for political purposes. So the method of violence he did not want. The method of civil liberties and civil rights activism he was doing, but he was not successful. He wanted some additional force. Somebody said he wanted to strengthen himself and the agitators to fight against the denial of civil liberties to the Indians. He called a meeting in a building called Empire Theatre in Johannesburg. And one of the participants, somebody called Said Habib, he said, yeah, we will resolve in the name of God to fight against this denial, Registration Act. And Gandhi was taken by surprise. And Gandhi said, yes, I support this, we will do this in the name of God. Later on, God was replaced by the term of truth. But 2 days later, a delegation went to the colonial secretary and said, we have taken a resolve to resist this in the name of God. And the one who proposed this told that colonial secretary, his name was Sheikh Haji Habib, I think originally from Surat. He said to the colonial secretary, what was the issue? Registration Act. So he said, if any official comes to my home to take the fingerprint registration of my wife, in the name of God, I will kill him, and then I will be killed. Now Gandhi said, this God cannot happen. This God, that conception of God is not God, what Gandhi would go by. So eventually, Gandhi revoked this notion of God, and he said, everybody is God. Everybody is Shastra. The Shastra of every religion says, thou shalt not kill. No Shastra Gandhi wrote says that you may commit murder or killing, or you may tell untruth. What I am trying to tell you is, civil liberties, freedom of conscience, freedom to own property, you had from political philosophy of liberalism. But but the injunction against killing and the injunction against lying, this was not available from them. The political system was operating on those freedoms, civil liberties, individual rights. I think Professor Sheth brought it out very well, that in liberal political philosophy, freedom of the individual, liberty of the individual is recognized, but that the individual has to follow truth, he cannot tell lies, that is not recognized in liberal political philosophy. Liberal political philosophy says, you do this in the private sphere, that's in the personal sphere. In the political sphere, that's not for us. Now Gandhi is breaking that, and I think what Professor Dhirubhai was trying to say was that it is Gandhi who, in the whole history of, I am a student of political philosophy, it is Gandhi who brought this into politics through Satyagraha. And it is not, Satyagraha is most effective in a situation where civil liberties and democratic rights are at least nominally recognized, that as they were in South Africa and even in India. If not in India, at least the mother country in UK, whatever was happening in India, even though we had a provincial government, viceroy and so on, but they were reported to the public, the liberal public in UK. So Gandhi developed this Satyagraha, Satya and Ahimsa idea to make up for the limitation of liberal democratic political theory and the practice based on that. So we should not look up to Gandhi's conception of Satya and Ahimsa, which is very powerful, very, I think both Professor Matai and Professor Dhirubhai brought out. But he could bring that into politics, that before Gandhi they were there in the scriptures. Gandhi had returned to his mentor and got lots of references, and he read them from Indian literature, philosophical thought, religious thought. But in the religious thought they were there. But Gandhi in Satyagraha brings that to guide resistance action. In resistance action, Gandhi says, you have to respect the truth or the being of your opponent. You are fighting against your opponent because he is impinging on the truth of myself. When I feel that the truth of my being, I think you said it, that Gandhi's truth is an ontological, existential, hermeneutical category. Dhirubhai said that if you look at it from Gadamer's viewpoint, truth appears differently. I am happy to tell you, I had at least a 4-hour meeting with Gadamer before he died, and I must bow my head, because that person, a polio person with a stick in his arm, when I was in his house in Sigalasan, he went to his kitchen to make tea for me. I said, I will come with you. He said, no, the kitchen is too small for two of us, and my wife is getting operated for the eye, something, that's why you're lucky I got me for these hours. The point is, according to Gadamer, truth is not a methodical, what Dhirubhai pointed out to Thomas Walgrave. Truth is not, of course, Wittgenstein would agree with Gadamer on this one. Truth is not a methodical correspondence of your concept and the reality. Truth is what your history, what your culture gives, that I am born into that. So my truth is defined by the culture into which I am born. I am not born on a clean slate. I am grown into a given truth. And then it grows, fusion of horizons. When my culture comes into contact with the other culture, my truth, the horizon of my truth, and that is part of my being. It's not only a part of my knowledge, it's not merely an epistemological category. It is a part of my being. It is partly existential. It is also epistemological. You can't do violence to epistemological truth, but you cannot reduce truth to an epistemological category. I know there are limitations of time. What I want to say is this about Gandhi's truth. That I see Gandhi's truth and Satyagraha only as a corrective, a transformative corrective, speaking as a political theory student, only as a corrective, as a transformative corrective to the limits of democracy, liberal democracy. Liberal democracy is a great thing. It's a great thing. But there are limits, and the limits of that, which is so in the Rowlatt Satyagraha in India and various and Amritsar massacre and so on, which were done to protect that one. To correct that, Gandhi used this freedom of conscience, inner voice, but combined it with this idea of this existential truth, which is it's a beautiful idea that he could bring. And I said I am only adding a footnote to what Dhirubhai Sheth and Mpai said, that this idea of truth, it has its applicability limitations. It cannot be resorted to easily. You know, it's not easy, it's very difficult. And it calls for technologies of self-formation, which is what Gandhi was doing. But it's not very easy, and it's not to be resorted to easily, except in grave cases and when you are prepared for the consequences. Well, I was trying to say, to conclude, that Gandhi's idea of this truth, that is Satya and Ahimsa, it goes together. Satya or love of even your enemy, even when you are fighting your enemy, retain that love, because your enemy and you share in the truth of Sat, absolute truth, even though we may not know what is absolute truth, but that is there. Now this truth, that's a very profound contribution to political philosophy and practice, but very difficult, very limited. Still, that is perhaps the only alternative to the method of terrorism and revolutionary violence. Thank you.
Is Joel, I have Joel, Usha, Niklas, and
Thanks. First, one thing about something Thomas was saying, or the question you raised, how can it be that, how are we to understand that possession, that practice or striving for non-possession could be related to, or could be necessary in order to understand the concept of justice, for instance. And somehow, I mean, it seems to me that this is very plain. There's no problem about this at all. Because if you don't, if you possess rather than practicing non-possession, what that means is that immediately when you start thinking about justice, you will think that justice must be such as to allow you to possess the things you think, the things you are tied up with, whether it's wealth or prestige or your own privacy or whatever. You will think, well, justice can't demand that I give this up. It's completely unjust for that to happen. So justice must be such as to allow me to possess what I feel, what I have tied myself up with. So obviously, if you live with possessions, you can't understand justice. You have determined already not to understand it. Then again, on the other hand, of course, this is not a point that can be, as it were, neutrally made by just looking at the concept of justice. Because if you are tied to this possessing mode, of living and thinking, then you will think that the concept of justice is precisely the concept which allows you to possess what you want to possess. So it's not, the concepts will look different and be different depending on what your attitude is. But there's no mystery about this, I think it's quite plain. And then the other thing was something Dhirubhai said about truth in Gandhi not being in itself a moral concept, but something that sustains morality. And I think in one sense I can perfectly well understand that. I mean, if by morality one means something like sort of maybe virtues or characteristic ways of relating to people, or rules for how to behave and so on. But maybe that's a quite, in a way, shallow concept of morality. Or if we want to keep that concept of morality, then maybe we can say, okay, or I would say, then morality isn't very important. But to me, the big question is sort of whether can we understand truth in such a way that it's actually internal to and only about, in a way, one's relationship to other people. Or is truth something that, this is how I sort of tend to understand the whole, as it were, wisdom tradition, both in the East and in Western philosophy, which is completely determined by I think in this respect at least, by the wisdom tradition, is that somehow truth is something you first find by yourself in a way, and it's in relation to God and in relation to the cosmos, and then when you have all that packaged together and you control your appetites and so on, then you can meet other people, and then you will meet them in the correct way. And if you don't have this together, you will meet them in the wrong way. So that how you relate to others is, as it were, something that follows from your self-transformation. And against that, I would think that what you find in the Gospels, in what Jesus is talking about, is not like that at all. He's saying rather that truth simply is the correct relationship to others. And correct is maybe the wrong word, but just the truth is just relating to others in an open way, in a spirit where you don't try to prevent them from coming near you, and you don't try to defend anything. So truth is this kind of non-possessive way of relating to others. So truth is not, and it's not that truth is about anything. It's that truth is this way of trying to keep, as it were, the space between yourself and the other open, or truth is what happens when this openness is there, or something like that. And that would also, I think, sort of, in a way, dissolve the apparent problems about what validates your truth, or what is the test of your truth as against somebody else's truth. Because here it's not a question. There's no my truth against the other's truth. There's just this openness that can be there if I want it to be there, and if the other person, of course, accepts it also. And then it becomes, I think, again quite plain why suffering, or in the way in which suffering and non-violence are tests of or internally related to truth. Because then, I mean, if you don't think like that, if you just think somehow the truth is something that somebody in some sense can possess, or that something that you know that you can, this is my truth, and then the test for that would be suffering, then of course, I mean, people can suffer for the most obvious falsehoods terribly. I mean, you can be a complete fundamentalist and suffer for your truth till the end. And maybe your truth can, in a sense, involve that you don't resist, you just accept the suffering. And still it's a kind of falseness, precisely insofar as you don't really want to relate openly to the other. Whereas if truth simply is this open relation to the other, then of course suffering is part of that. It means, because suffering means that you don't try to impose, and you don't try to guard yourself, and so on. So, which is in itself suffering, and it's non-violence by definition. So if keeping this space open between yourself and the other, if that is the truth, then suffering, non-violence, all these things are just other names for, or aspects of this attitude. So there's again then no mystery about how these things hand together.
So Usha Taka is next.
Thank you. It has been very stimulating to listen to the remarks of Professor Thomas Walgreen and Professor D.L. Shade, and very stimulating discussion also. And just to add what has been already said by Dhirubhai, Professor Mathai and Professor Pantham, like to say 4 points. First of all, I very much agree with Dhirubhai when he says that Gandhi's theory of truth is lasting contribution. Now, Gandhi himself had said that truth and non-violence are as old as hills. But what is important to notice is that Gandhi provides new meanings and new dimensions. And here the most important thing is that how Gandhi combines the personal and the political. So to have the idea of ethics or morality or truth is something very much embedded in Hindu thought. But Gandhi provides social dimension to it. So he opens up a new area. And then he himself says, and we also can see how his journey in personal life as well as political life and social life is from truth to truth. And this is the most exciting part about Gandhi, that his passion for truth and his ever inquisitiveness to know the truth. Now, secondly, I would like to point out that, Gandhi connects the idea of truth with freedom, that others are also free to hold their truth, free to search for their truth. If I am free to search for my truth, they also must have this freedom. And so he respects their truth, the truth of the others. And this opens up tremendous opportunities for dialogues, which are usually lacking in I think most of the times. And ultimately the idea is to make it all inclusive. That means if I am finding my truth, I should not be the only one. But the truth, Gandhi himself says that we do not know what is absolute truth. We go from relative truth to relative truth, but in the hope that we'll find the ultimate truth. And one of Gandhi's associate and commentators on Gandhi, that is Dada Dharmadhikari, when he talks of truth, he talks about unity of life. And he said there is mutuality of life. And this is truth, this mutuality of life, this unity of life. And that is why Gandhi remained one of the most uncommitted persons, but his only commitment was to truth. And there are many limitations also, we can talk about it later on. But I would like to have one more comment that, this is what Gandhi does to himself, to society, all those who are around us. And one of his associates, Rehana Tayyabji, she sums up in a beautiful sentence when she says that Bapu gave us courage to face truth. That means Gandhi not only encourages us to find truth, but when something unpleasant turns up, he also gives us courage to truth. And I think that is why Gandhi remains very important for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Niklas is next.
I think my point, you all mostly pointed out the things I wanted to put forth right now, so I'll skip mine.
Then it's Kesit Pandey.
Since I'm philosophy, so I'd like to become here little much more clear, not abstract, as it is philosophy is infamous, basically Indian philosophy sometimes. Well, first, I would like to speak only a couple of minutes, not more than, because we have basic time. First of all, I think we must see Gandhi. We should not compartmentalize his ideas differently, like different thoughts like morality, religion, metaphysics, politics, and etc. and truth. This is the one idea I feel. And the problems in understanding Gandhi arises basically when we try to divide Gandhi, this Gandhi, this Gandhi, this Gandhi, because Gandhi is one whole. It's not like if you try to take Gandhi from its particular context and then try to see Gandhi. I think that would be most difficulty, most problematic understanding of Gandhi, I suppose. This is one point I wanted to make. And before proceeding further, I would like to say that what I am saying is that the Gandhi, it is something which I understand that better way to understand Gandhi. But I would like to point out 2-3 points. Just, I think Thomas has said rejecting Gandhi, the 2 points about conscience and that conscience as subjectivity, which I don't agree with. That conscience is not subjectivity in Gandhi. It's something more. It's a intersubjectivity, I would like to say, in Western phenomenological movement as it is grasped. It is intersubjectivity. And then the second point Thomas made, truth is reality, maybe something which might be problematic in Gandhi, but I feel that truth is reality, as Mehtaiya and Seth also pointed out, that Gandhi's truth is not something which is problematic from this point of view. First of all, we must try to understand which truth we are talking about, which theory of truth. Of course, truth, when we talk about truth, it is the propositional truth. And what is that? That is whether we are holding correspondence theory or coherence theory or pragmatic theory. But I suppose that that it is not neither of these three which Gandhi is faced with. It's neither correspondence theory, nor coherence theory, nor pragmatic theory. And this precisely is the point where Gandhi and Wittgenstein comes closer. When Wittgenstein says that I'm not a religious person, but I can't help seeing every problem from religious point of view, which has been a quite debatable point in Wittgensteinians. And I feel that that is why Gandhi also did not did not divide politics with morality or religion. And when somebody tried to say that I would like to read Gandhi without religion, but religion is not the Western sense of the term, but dharma in Indian context of the term. But dharma also, he didn't say that I'm like Vedantin only, but it's very important to see that he also said, and I didn't hear anybody saying like this, that he said that I'm Anekantavadi also, that Jaina's point of view. So, yeah, he says, I have quoted Gandhi saying that I'm Anekantavadi. That is well endorsed document, I can show you, sir, later on. That is I have quoted in my emphasis submitted to the university. Now, Gandhi said that I'm not
That he was Anekantavad very presented from very came from.
It's like,
he mentioned that categorically.
yes, he has mentioned that I'm Anekantavadi. The person Gandhi is saying that I'm Anekantavadi shows that when he's saying that I'm Hindu, he's not saying that Hindu in the limited sense of the term, but he's saying that I'm Anekantavadi.
He has also given the translation to Anekantavad as many-sidedness of reality.
Yeah.
This is how Gandhi has
That is
translated.
then philosophy mean.
No, the translation that Gandhi has given, the English translation, many-sidedness of reality.
But I'm impressed with the Thomas, the crux of the, I mean, Thomas hitting the crux of the point of Gandhi, that is talisman. And that I feel is, yes, that is there. But one point which I disagree with the Seth and Mehtaiya is that validation of Gandhi's, Gandhi's attempt to validate truth. I think there is no such as an attempt by Gandhi as validation of truth. But actually, in place of validation, I think Gandhi should be seen in the context of realization of truth. When we realize truth, it doesn't mean the experiencing of truth. Experiencing of truth is something different from realizing of truth. In Wittgensteinian term also, when we experience facts of the world, but we do not realize the facts of the world, and what we realize that is morality and religion, sphere of unsayable of Wittgenstein, is something which is showable, and the realization is something to which truth, though Wittgenstein believes in correspondence theory of truth, but I suppose when we take Gandhi and Wittgenstein, then it belongs to unsayable, and that cannot be spoken about. And these are the points which I wanted to share with you. And the Rith concept. Rith concept, the cosmic law as interpreted by Seth, I would add to that one more point, that is Gandhi accepted, and that was the cosmic law that is given by Mimamsa school of Indian philosophy, that is Apurva. And Gandhi accepted that also. And when Gandhi was anarchist, said that there is no state and the God is more than state. I suppose that has to be realized in day-to-day our life, as state is moving into individualistic freedom, suppose, to which we are resisting at present, that we have to have freedom, but state is coming into much more in our life. Gandhi didn't talk about something that we can arrive at that ideal, but at least we proceed towards that, and to get our freedom, we have to resist that kind of notion given by Gandhi, I suppose. And God is truth and truth is God. Yes, it is not contradictory as it pointed out, but Gandhi says that I have changed this notion from God is truth to truth is God in order to accommodate, I suppose, if I'm not wrong. He said that in order to accommodate those viewpoints, like those who are called atheists, in Western sense of the term, because Indian sense of the term atheist is the one who doesn't believe in Vedas. So it is why I suppose that though it is not contradictory, I agree with the said, and he was so accommodating that his main focus was that to the spirit of the human being, and that is the truth. And that is why it came said in India also the concept of religion of Gandhi basically is he talks about eternal religion, if I'm not wrong. Thank you.
Just a footnote. It's not to accommodate, but communicating that Gandhi restated as truth is God. Because only after that, Nehru said, yeah, now I understand. That truth is God. I can understand, but God is truth, I did not. Whatever that means.
Evdath is next, and then Devi Anthony.
That is. I sent my
Yes.
I have sent my note to Dhirubhai for clarification. Okay. Yeah, but there is. This is the question that I want. How you hints?
हाउस में रखे देंगे.
How there is a trinity, Satyam Shivam Sundaram. Satyam Shivam Sundaram is a trinity. Have you something to say about other part of Shivam and Sundaram which Gandhi is confident? Yeah, I could quickly respond.
Can you also repeat the question?
Huh?
Can you also reformulate the question?
Yes.
Translate the question.
Yeah. I think, I don't know whether it's an old trinity, Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram, but it's something which came as a trinity of thought after, in 19th century. But that's not important. The important thing is that Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram, which means truth, Satyam, Shivam means welfare, or how would you? Shiv. Huh?
Sundaram.
No, Shivam.
Species.
Not a species. No. I think well-being. Well-being of all. And Sundaram, which is aesthetically good or beautiful. This, I think, I would say if one develops theory of Gandhi's truth and Gandhi, it will sort of would make a more rounded and more complete statement. Tagore has also written about it. That Gandhi's truth is inclusive of the idea of well-being and beautiful. Beauty in terms of truth is a different thing than just visual pleasure. I mean, that needs to be developed. But yes, I think Satyam Shivam Sundaram is a line of pursuit where Gandhi's theory of truth can be further taken further. If that is what you meant.
I couldn't convey my question. I said, has Gandhi said anything about, yes, you mentioned, he said something about truth. But has he said anything about Shivam and Sundaram? That's all that I know.
Not at one place.
Whether one place or not,
Yeah,
can you
of
conceptualize
course.
it?
Because there is now a lot of that has come out on exchanges between Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore. And it's very clear there that Gandhi, I mean, his respect and his kind of learning from Gurudev, the name he gave to him, accommodates, not just accommodates, includes the idea of aesthetic beauty into his idea of truth. Now this is published now through Gandhi Tagore thing. So far as well-being is concerned, I think it's already there in Gandhi's idea of truth, because through non-violence. I think non-violence is a very important concept for Gandhi. I mean, as I have understood it, non-violence, truth for Gandhi expresses only through non-violent action. I think that's another validation of Gandhi's truth, that if the action is not non-violent, it's lacking in truth. So it is that's very important, and it's the non-violence which takes the idea of truth further. And it is in this context that well-being of the whole, we have talked about Gandhian idea of politics, we have not discussed its economy, where truth includes Shiva.
Now, if,
That is the whole.
I understand that the question is whether the question is whether Gandhi has written about.
So I think it's credible, not just credible, it's convincing to me to have the totality, this trilogy of Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram as Gandhi and Truth. Sorry.
Then I will give a clarification whether Gandhi has written on beauty. You know, Gandhi, I have not come across an instance where Gandhi has used the word Shivam for welfare. But if you want to have a reference, I can refer you to the book, the collection, selections from Gandhi done by Sriman Narayan in the 5th volume. You know, there is a section on Gandhi's writings on truth. And this is published by Navjivan. It's a 5-volume collection. In the 5th volume, there is a section on Gandhi's writings on truth, where Gandhi has repeatedly said that beauty is in truth. We must be able to see truth in beauty. But he has also written, it's mainly based on Tagore's writings, what is art, and derived from that.
Beauty in truth and truth in beauty are two different things.
Yes, that's different, but this is the reference I would like to make. The 5th volume of Sriman Narayan's selections on Gandhi.
Thank you. So, maybe Anthony?
Thank you so much. Yeah, we had wonderful sessions of really scintillating discussions with Thomas and Dilip and other people. Yeah, I would like to begin with a kind of footnote to what Professor Thomas said. You are trying to trying to engage or to position Gandhi and truth in the philosophical tradition of the West and in the Indian tradition. You brought in Socrates and also later Wittgenstein, hopefully. But I thought the works of Kierkegaard, whether he makes a distinction between the aesthetic, the ethic, and the religious levels of human existence, comes very close to the I think the idea of existence in Gandhi. I mean, not exactly the same, but here because Kierkegaard also is anti-Hegelian, the idea of Geist, the spirit as the goal of philosophical thinking. And he says, all go by omnibus. I refuse to go by the omnibus, which refers to Hegel, I suppose, the Geist. So here we have a very clear case, and I think that later Wittgenstein is dwelling on Kierkegaardian notion of truth, what we call it, the distinction of the aesthetic, the ethical, and religious. I mean, that's what I would like to kind of put note. The second, I like to come to Professor Dhirubhai. Is very interesting, very, very interesting. I mean, you're trying to base, as I understand, Gandhi and notion of truth in the Indian philosophical heritage, I mean, when it comes across. But I thought, an important category is notion of mauna in Gandhi. Without silence, you cannot understand what truth is. So even once a week, he says, I'll practice mauna. I mean, that is tremendous. I think it's also come in philosophical practice. So without mauna, I just cannot understand what truth is. I think that is very important. Maybe to use a kind of philosophical oxymoron of under Gandhi, to be silent speakingly and to speak silently. It may be oxymoron, but that's what I think he would challenge us. Yeah.
Mauna is silence.
Yeah, mauna is what you call silence. And Gandhi made a practice. Once a week, he was
Not
incomplete.
speak, not
Yeah.
silence outside. You don't.
internally is silent. I mean, of course, it has to have certain conditions. I don't. But I was told he used to entertain questions. He would give the answer in a note. He would give back. I mean, but he won't speak. He won't speak. So that idea of Mauna, I think it is also very cardinal to the Indic tradition of philosophizing, which I find it very challenging. I have another problem. As a student of hermeneutics, what we are having is we are trying to engage, I believe, multiple Gandhis. So I am tempted to ask, will the real Gandhi please stand up to make? I understand. I mean, it is dialogical. This is exactly the problem in hermeneutical engagement. They have different textures of understanding, and how do we locate certain textures of encountering Gandhi, the human person, Gandhi, the advocate of the truth, Gandhi, the freedom fighter, Gandhi, the person closest to truth. I mean, that's one thing I would like to say. Then one of the professors here, he said about referred to the Gospels and the truth. In fact, today is Palm Sunday. In the reading or the narrative of the Passion Sunday, you have Pontius Pilate asking Jesus, what is truth? And Jesus was silent. He didn't give in fact, he is very vocal earlier times, but there
Pilate has no patience to hear that.
Well, that's interpretation. The Gospels say, they're very, very true about it. When Pontius Pilate, before sentencing to crucifixion, he asked Jesus, what is truth? And Jesus is silent. I mean, that was Professor Gandhi. I like to...
What does it mean?
Well, it has to be understood, because I believe the truth to which Pontius Pilate was referring to what is not the truth what he was teaching about. So therefore, it cannot be verbalized at that time. And Pontius Pilate, though he himself says, because of God's authority, you are now king. All right, yeah, he says that. And so it is in that context, I think, the question of verbalizing truth and the question of non-verbalizing, or the intersemiotic of what is truth, yeah, I think that's very challenging notion of that. So, of course, earlier he will say, what you call, if you know the truth, truth will make you free. The same Jesus says that earlier in the Gospels. You know the truth, truth makes you free. So you have this problem of understanding. I like to end here. Thank you.
Can I make a footnote to?
Yeah.
The chair allows two footnotes before lunch, one to Dhirubhai and one to Nicholas, and then we break up for lunch, I think.
I think
No, I just wanted to.
End of the session?
No, one more silences.
Let me just inform you that I think it's now 1 sharp. So if we have just the last footnotes and then go for lunch, then we can reconvene and continue the discussion in the afternoon. Will that be all right? And,
that is better.
So, can I give my footnote? Just on the silence part and the Gospels, I think also it's a very important thing. My interpretation of it is more that Pilatus uses the questions about truth in a situation in which he is completely aware of what he's doing, cannot in any way correlate with what he knows is to be right. So he poses the question of, because he knows the political situation, he's aware quite well of what the agenda of the ruling Jewish class there is, and he poses the question of truth in order to avoid the question of truth, as put it in epistemological terms, for instance. So how, who knows what truth is a way of putting it. And to that, Jesus responds with silence, because it's not a question of whether, that he could give a theory about what truth is. It's a way of relating, a direct relation to that person who is saying that to him at that instance. And I think it's quite clear that message comes through, even though then it's up to the other person to either embrace that truth, which is there between, or call it the moral truth or whatever, or then to to reject it and find ways of legitimatizing one's rejection of truth, either by making it a question about knowledge in that sense. So that was my.
And just footnote on silence. I think Gandhi did not observe silence in response to a question. So it's not the same. It's a silence to talk to one's self. It's a what I call technology of pursuit of truth. So that silence makes you to talk to yourself and introspect. That's the meaning. And therefore Maun has to do something with Muni, which is a different kind of concept of person. So if you ask real Gandhi to stand up, maybe he will observe silence.
That's what I was trying to say.
Thank you. Let's have lunch and reconvene at, how long will it take? We don't have a schedule. An hour is probably roughly what we need. So 2 o'clock we should try to be here.